I'm talking to Dr. Sandra Branham, who's a professor at Clemson's Coastal Research and Education Center, and you are a vegetable specialist and geneticist, and vegetables are such an important part of South Carolina life. First of all, people love to grow home vegetable gardens, and then for our state's economy, vegetable production on the commercial sale is very important, but we have so many challenges. How can you help our poor vegetable growers?
So we have the perfect climate here in South Carolina for disease. You know, it's warm, it's moist, and that really creates an excellent environment for disease. So we have really high disease pressure, insect pressure. Also, as heat rises, plants where we are harvesting the fruit as the edible portion, they have trouble producing pollen. You have pollen viability goes down, flower production goes down, and that means your yields go down as it gets hotter. So those are really where I'm focusing.
So we know that people, we say get your tomatoes and pick them until the end of May, and then you're not going to have any more until the fall. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is happening with beans, with butter beans and with snap beans and things like that. And that means first also that the people who are canning those or freezing them, they can't get things locally anymore. They've got to bring things in from so far away, and everything costs so much more. So what can you do to try to help us?
So the last 2 summers, I've had a graduate student, Morgan Stone. Her project has been to look at all the old American cultivars across our breeding history, the last 50 years of snap beans. We had 300 varieties in the field that we grown in triplicate. We had 10,000 snap bean plants each summer that we were processing.
And so, so tell me what you've been able to accomplish and things that you found that enabled you to speed this up, if you can get a mapping of where the heat tolerance or the disease resistance is on certain chromosomes within certain plants.
Mm-hmm. So I can give you an example of melon, so cantaloupe. I have a student, Venkat Ganaparthy. He's working on a project where we have a disease-resistant melon that tastes terrible. And we have a wonderful flavored melon that has all the disease susceptibility. You know, you can't grow it without it getting disease. So he has crossed those 2 plants, and then he mapped DNA. So he found the parts of the DNA that control that disease resistance, that give you disease resistance. And then he took, let's say 500 plants, you get the DNA out, you look for that piece of DNA that has the disease resistance, and he may be able to narrow that down to 5 or 10 plants that have all the disease resistance.
What you've been able to do is by finding out where on the chromosomes some of these traits are, you don't have to grow the plant out to its entirety. You can just get the first true leaf on some of them and really speed things up, at least as far as, let's see which one of these 500 plants has disease resistance.
Right, he just pulls out the DNA from that one leaf, finds the disease resistant pieces of DNA, and then can select maybe 5 or 10 plants that he has to grow all the way to maturity to look at, you know, sweetness, flavor, all these other traits that we really care about.
And that in itself is a lot of work. And so you have the DNA mapped out for a couple of plants, but you're working on doing it for a lot more. And so you've got one room that's an artificial growth chamber, because you need to be growing plants year round to get them to the stage where you can start telling things about them.
Yeah, we have it, we call it our fake winter room. So we can control the lighting and the temperature. So we do short days like you would have in winter with very cold temperatures. And that's for, you know, the brassicas we have behind us, they require that. So we put them in there, and then they will go to seed, and then we can get that seed to use for our next round of breeding.
So that's why some of the plants that we wouldn't normally grow through seed, you have to, because you're going to have to grow them out and start looking at their traits that way. But what this means is that we are going to be able to hopefully release plants, and it'll be such an improvement for the farmers because they will be able to grow things locally throughout the summer instead of having to shut down.
Right, and then, you know, there's less transportation costs. So we've got 2/3 of the US population on the East Coast, but most snap beans are actually produced in Wisconsin, Michigan, New York. So they're being shipped very far. If we can grow them longer throughout the year here in South Carolina, then we don't have to ship them quite as far. So you have those reduce costs.
And then the brassicas, which are the collard greens and and the mustard greens and things that and turnips we love so much. Even though they're called cold weather crops, in South Carolina, you said they love to get diseases, even though, because it's not cold here compared to other parts of the world.
So there's a specific disease that's caused by bacteria. It's called bacterial leaf blight. There's nothing chemically that we can spray on these plants to try to mitigate this disease.
And so, so even if you wanted and had the ability to spray something, in this case, you just can't.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been working really hard on developing turnip greens and mustard greens, collard greens that have that resistance. So if they get the disease, they have very minimal symptoms. You don't get that loss of yield for the growers. So they can still be profitable.
And this is, there's nothing genetically modified about this, so everybody can feel, if that's a concern of yours, you don't have to be at all concerned about that.
Yeah, everything we do is just traditional breeding, but we're using modern techniques, using DNA and markers to try to speed up that process, but none of that is GMO.
And as new problems come, like this new nematode that we have, I imagine that the nematologists are going to try to start incorporating some of these ways to speed up the process of finding things that we can have that will cover the whole range of problems for growers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sandra, it sounds like there's a lot of just plain old-fashioned farming and gardening in what you do, but by bringing in this new research and these new ways of speeding up the process to find plants that have resistance to diseases and have wonderful flavor, y'all are really doing a great service to the farmers and to the citizens of South Carolina. Thank you so very much.
I appreciate it. I love my job. I love my team. We've all worked hard, and thank you for having me.